Called for us to be married at Beth Israel, our family synagogue. I was stationed at West Point, and that was no problem. The only problem, however, at that time was in no small way dissimilar from what your former Rabbi Sabato Morias faced during the Civil War period, having to do with freedom of speech by a rabbi from the pulpit. I know you know much more of his legacy as a devoted supporter of President Lincoln than many other congregants of Mikveh Israel at that time, or of the Democratic Party. And after a heated struggle, and within the support of then Parmist Abraham Hart, the rabbi eventually was elected to lifetime occupancy of the Mikveh Israel pulpit. Now, Rabbi Reuben McGill of blessed memory was Susan's rabbi at BZBI. He was learned and a most pleasant man. His sermons, as those of Rabbi Morias, were also laced with contemporary politics. His sermons, which I attended as a serving U.S. Army officer, were laced with anti-Richard Nixon overtone, something anathema to me, as President Nixon was my commander-in-chief. The year, of course, was 1973, a year of political turmoil and social unrest, owing to the Vietnam War and the Watergate crisis. Now, using expert intelligence resources, Susan therefore wisely selected the date for our wedding at BZBI when Rabbi McGill was scheduled to be on leave for his summer vacation in June of '73. I retained my good friend, Chaplain Rabbi David Lapp, who was stationed at Fort Hamilton, New York, to marry us. Rabbi Lapp, you'll recall, was at Fort Knox with me, to marry us at Beth Israel. 2 weeks before June 17th, when our small family wedding was to be held in the BZBI chapel, Rabbi McGill phoned Susan. He called her Susala, expressing surprise that he had just noted on the synagogue's schedule our wedding, and told her immediately he changed his vacation plan to a fishing along with Rabbi Lapp. So there we had 20 guests, 2 rabbis, a cousin, made up the wedding party. Now, in no time, Rabbi McGill and I befriended each other, never spoke of politics, and because of his blessings and those of Rabbi Lapp, Susan and my marriage has survived now in its 10th decade. The patriotism of Mikveh Israel's congregation, as recorded by Bertram Cohn in his American Jewry and the Civil War, is also evidenced by the fact, I found to be quite interesting, but a testimony to what you continue to do, that of all contributions made by synagogues of Philadelphia to the erection of the Lincoln Memorial, Mikveh Israel was the largest, twice for $300. I also discovered through your website that Mikveh Israel and our West Point Jewish community share a similar type road to be housed in such a location as we occupy at this moment, and in the beautiful chapel, which is the West Point Jewish Chapel at West Point. A history not unlike that of the Commodore Uriah Levy Center and Jewish Chapel at the U.S. Naval Academy, where venues for Jewish services changed over the years until the Levy Center was completed in 2005 and the West Point Jewish Chapel was dedicated in '84. You had, I think, some 7 moves in finding this wonderful location. At West Point, it was mandatory chapel in the cadet chapel. Then finally, when the Supreme Court said we're not mandatory to go to chapel, we had Sunday services in the middle of the cemetery at a Protestant chapel from 9 o'clock to 10, after we removed the crucifix, but had to replace it by 10 o'clock because the Lutherans were coming in. And of course, then we couldn't have an Onyx Shabbat or anything like that. So then we moved to classrooms, we moved to laboratories, and even allowed us to have cadets for services on Friday evenings, which was a big break that they could get away from cleaning the barracks or whatever they were doing. And then in 1984, we occupied. And as I speak, our West Point cadets are hosting, this very moment, the annual Jewish Warrior Weekend at West Point. It's a gathering of West Point cadets, Naval Academy, Coast Guard, Air Force cadets, along with students from local universities who spend the weekend together for religious services, attending a football game, and simply bonding as Jews committed to service our great nation. As many of you know, the first class of West Point graduates had 50% Jews. There were only 2 graduates, of course, that Jew was Simon Magruder Levy. Seems that the Levy's had a special place in our Navy, but our Army, and at this synagogue. Today at West Point, there are a total of 14 Jewish male and female cadets who will graduate in 2014, 19 to graduate in 2015, 22 in 2016, and 20 in the class of 2017. In addition, there are 2 Jewish cadets in the West Point Prep School. I think that's fantastic. One Jewish graduate, unfortunately, Lieutenant David Bernstein, class of 2001, gave the ultimate sacrifice for his nation in Iraq. Our full-time Jewish chaplain at West Point is Rabbi Major Henry Susan, who was raised in Western Europe, has a master's degree in religion, and the Susan family, of course, is very prominent throughout Asia and the Middle East. Master's degree in religion, College of Jewish Studies, a master's degree in Constitutional Law, PhD from the University of Sussex. His wife is a doctor. They have 4 children. We could not be more blessed to have an active duty Jewish chaplain, a major with those academic credentials. Now, as I bring to conclusion my experience as a Jewish Army officer, allow me to relate what Susan and I do in my capacity as civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army for Washington, D.C. It's an honorific position. Politics has not been involved. Honored to serve for now into the more than 12 years. I'm one of some 80 what they call CASAs, civilian aides to Secretary of the Army, representing each state, with some states having 5 or 6 civilian aides based on the size of the military bases in their states. Among the activities, we support the Army recruiting efforts and our wounded warriors. We combine Susan's performing arts experiences and my being a soldier by promoting our U.S. Army Band, Pershing Zone, as for joint performances with the military band of the People's Liberation Army of China, which was held both here in the United States in 2011, including at the Academy of Music, and in China last October, and on all occasions, Susan and I were in their company. As can be said, and everyone's aware of the potential for conflict between the United States and China. In my view, for a period of time, both the United States and China, through their military bands, were playing off the same sheet of music. And when we traveled together in China or here in the United States, both nations, through their military bands, were traveling on the same road in the same direction for the same purpose. Perhaps a step at a time, we can create better understanding, perhaps leading even to mutual trust. Now, during the holiday season, as a Jewish officer on active duty, what did I do? Well, traded places with Christian officers for Christmas and Easter and the like, and they took my place during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and other holidays. As a civilian aide, Susan and I, for the 12th year this year, will visit soldiers on duty in the National Capital Region, bring a holiday message, a thank you for your service, and goodies ranging from chili, pizza, sandwiches, fruits, cookies, and pretzels. We began in December 2001, a one-day Goldberg sleigh trip. Last year it took us 5 days, having met with and thanked soldiers as though we were Santa Claus, some 450 over the course of 5 days. And it was about 6-7 years ago that we were invited by the Old Guard, the Sentinels, the ceremonial unit in Washington and Fort Myer, if we would visit the Sentinels who guard the Tomb of the Unknown on Christmas Eve at 11 o'clock when taps is played. They open the cemeteries, especially for us. They escort us in. We're there as the guard is changed, and then we go underneath the edifice, chat with the soldiers, again, sharing some goodies and some good holiday cheers. They are to be remembered. Today I salute each of you of Mikveh Israel for remembering and honoring our veterans, for whom we owe so much for our nation's security. For now some 12 years, as Our nation has been at war, and once again, after the Gulf, Vietnam, Korea, World War II, we remember the veterans who served, be it by the draft or voluntarily. They and their families have demonstrated what selfless service means. They have sacrificed a great deal, many in blood, lost arms and legs, and lost opportunities in many ways. The uniform of those who served has often changed. But what has not changed is the determination and spiritual strength of the men and women willing to serve our great nation. In recent time, less than 1% of Americans have stepped forward to do what they see as their duty. 1% of the entire American population. Less than 30% of our youth are eligible to serve in our military. Disqualified, less than 30% disqualified by drugs, obesity, criminal record. Today we have an elite force, contrary to previous wars, among those who served when there was a draft. We can indeed be proud, each and every one of them. Today, a thank you for your service is no longer enough. Our veterans need jobs, the very best health care and education. Many need our support lest we break the social contract with them and our all-volunteer force fades from history. Fortunately, the most recent joiners to the ranks of our veterans have many government benefits, but our government cannot do it all. As each of you are inclined to do, seek out a veteran, his or her family. Inquire as to their needs, their well-being, especially during the holiday season. Whether with toys or foodstuffs, many veterans are just getting back on their feet after many deployments, facing death and often broken homes. And we see too many suicides and too much of sexual assault, often prompted by unrecognizable wounds as traumatic brain injury from IEDs and post-traumatic stress disorder from being in constant combat. Our Army is working with the Department of Defense, Labor Department, VA, and local community to transition and reintegrate our soldiers and Army veterans into civilian life. These veterans have skills and experience that can be adapted to local occupation. Each understands reliability, discipline, and commitment to the task at hand. They have been there, and most are anxious to do their part as we build a better life for everyone. Let us join together to ensure Veterans Day represents what it has long meant, to honor our veterans. Words alone are not enough. Let us not let them down. I'm going to conclude, if you might, with words written by the late General Douglas MacArthur. He wrote them to deliver in 1964 at the dedication of his, what is now Memorial in Norfolk, Virginia. He passed a month before that dedication was made, and fortunately I came across for General Haig a number of years ago those handwritten notes. I'd like to share them with you as conclusion and in tribute to all the veterans present and those who've given the ultimate sacrifice. I quote, "Wherein lies our security?" MacArthur asked. "It is the American man," but I would add, and woman in this age, "at arms. From personal experience, I know how well he and she guards us. I have seen men die at Verdun, at St. Miguel, at Guadalcanal, in the foxholes of Bataan and the batteries of Corregidor, in the battlefields of Korea, where many of your relatives gave the ultimate sacrifice, and many served and came back. They served on land, on sea, and in the air, amidst jungle and swamp, hot sands and frozen reaches, smoldering mud of shell-pocked roads and dripping beaches. He was gaunt and ghostly," said MacArthur, wrote MacArthur. "They were grieved and loused, filth, and they stank. And I loved them," MacArthur wrote. "They die hard, that American fighting man and woman," wrote MacArthur. "Not like a dove, when hit, folds its wings and gently comes down quietly, but like a wounded wolf at bay, with lips curled back in a snarl. They left me," said MacArthur, wrote MacArthur, "with an abiding faith in the future of this nation. The faith our beloved land will once more know the serenity of hope without fear. The faith in the course of our destiny as a free, prosperous, and happy people." End quote. My friends, today, thanks to those who served and those still serving across our globe, in hostile areas, we too can have faith and rejoice in that for which we stand. God bless these United States of America.
From time Solomon until today, we thank you so much. An honor. Thank you again. I'll try and leave you with the Mikveh Israel.
What can you say? It was wonderful, enlightening, emotional, and we always have to remember our heroes, always. And Woody from Congregation Mikveh Israel Association, it's a book of photographs, 50 years of Israel, and we'd like to present this to you and Susan today, and thank you so very much. And Susan, by the way, walked in near the kitchen, and she said, "Well, can I help?" And I said, "You can." And she jumped right in, and she cut the cakes, and she did whatever needed to be done. She's right here at Mikveh Israel. And I know we're going to see both of you again, we hope. Thank you so much.